A call that changed everything. The morning had started just like any other at the emergency dispatch center. The quiet hum of computers filled the room, punctuated by the occasional call about a minor car accident or a missing pet. It was a routine Tuesday until the call came in. 911 dispatcher Mary Lawson had been in this job for over a decade. She had heard it all. Panicked parents, medical emergencies, even the occasional prank call from kids who didn't realize the weight of dialing 911. But as soon as she answered this call, she knew something was different. 911, what's your emergency? At first, all she could hear was soft breathing. A pause. Then, finally, a small, hesitant voice broke the silence. Mama. The voice was so faint, so fragile, that Mary leaned forward instinctively. She recognized the voice of a child, one who sounded far too young to be making this call. Sweetheart, this is 911, she said, keeping her voice calm and warm. Can you tell me your name? Silence. Then a sniffle. Mama's not here, the child whispered. Mary felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at the clock. 8:03 a.m. Most children this young should have been waking up to breakfast, getting ready for daycare, or playing under the watchful eyes of a parent, not calling 911. Okay, sweetheart, Mary said carefully, her fingers already flying across the keyboard, trying to trace the call. Are you home right now? Are you alone? Another pause. Then, a barely audible answer. I'm with baby, but he won't wake up. Mary's heartbeat quickened. This was serious. What's your name, sweetie? She asked again. Ethan, the little voice finally replied. Mary's fingers typed quickly, her screen beginning to generate a possible location, but something else was happening in the background of the call. An odd noise, growing louder. A dog barking. Not just barking. Growling. Snarling. Ethan, is there a dog with you? She asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. Doggie's mad. He's hungry, Ethan said. Mary's breath hitched. Something was very wrong. A race against time. The call trace came through, an address in an isolated part of town. A small trailer park on the outskirts, far from any major roads or police stations. Mary turned to her supervisor. We need officers dispatched now. Child in distress. Possibly an infant unconscious. Unknown situation with an aggressive dog. Within seconds, police units were mobilized, sirens cutting through the stillness of the morning. Back on the call, Mary kept talking, kept trying to keep Ethan calm. Can you see outside, sweetheart? Maybe a street sign or a house number. A rustling sound. Then, windows too dirty, can't see. Mary bit her lip, glancing at the timer on the call. They had been connected for nearly 5 minutes. Every second mattered. Ethan, listen to me, okay? Help is coming. But I need you to stay away from the dog. Can you go to another room? No doors. Doggies scratching. Babies still sleeping. A cold dread settled in Mary's chest. She could hear it now. The scraping of claws against something hollow. The frantic, hungry whines of an animal on edge. Ethan, I need you to stay very still. Can you hold on to the baby? I tried. Baby's cold. Mary's eyes burned with unshed tears. She knew she had to keep him talking, keep him from panicking. Can you tell me how old you are, Ethan? I'm 3, he said softly. Mary squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. The 3-year-old, calling 911, alone with a baby. This was every dispatcher's nightmare. Then, sirens. Over the phone, she heard it, the distant wail of approaching police cars. Ethan, I think help is there now, sweetheart. Do you hear the sirens? Mom. Okay, I want you to listen very carefully. When they knock, I need you to yell so they can find you. Can you do that? Okay. Mary barely had time to exhale before the radio crackled to life. Unit 47 to dispatch. We've arrived at the location. We hear barking. Aggressive. No visual on children yet. Going in now. Mary stayed on the line, holding her breath, waiting. The trailer of secrets. The police officers, Sergeant James Collins and Officer Rafael Hernandez, pulled up outside the rundown trailer, its once white walls streaked with dirt and rust. The barking was immediate and deafening, the sound of claws scraping against wood. "Stay alert," Collins murmured, hand on his radio. They approached cautiously. The trailer's windows were too grimy to see inside. The front door was cracked open, a sliver of darkness within. "Ethan," Collins called, knocking loudly. "Police, can you hear us?" For a moment, nothing. Then, a tiny voice, weak, but there. "Help." Collins didn't wait. He signaled to Hernandez. They were going in. What they found inside. The moment they stepped inside, they were hit by the overwhelming stench of decay and filth. The floor was littered with trash, old food containers, and torn-up rags. The air was thick with the scent of something rotting. Then they saw it. The dog. An emaciated German shepherd, ribs jutting out like a skeleton covered in fur, stood near the back of the room. Its eyes were wild, its body tensed. And there, curled up on a filthy mattress, was Ethan. The little boy was thin, pale, his tiny hands clutching something wrapped in a blanket. Hernandez's voice softened. "Ethan, it's okay, buddy. We're here to help." But Ethan wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the dog. "Doggie's mad," he whispered. The dog snarled, stepping forward, its gaze locked on the officers. For a tense moment, nobody moved. Then, Collins reached into his belt, pulling out a protein bar from his pocket. Slowly, he unwrapped it, the scent of food filling the air. The dog hesitated. "Easy, boy," Collins murmured, tossing the bar to the floor. The dog lunged for it, devouring it in seconds, and in that brief moment of distraction, Hernandez scooped Ethan into his arms, cradling the small child against his chest. "We got him," he radioed in. "Child, it is safe." Collins carefully approached the bundle in Ethan's arms. The baby. He peeled back the blanket, his breath catching in his throat. The baby's skin was ice cold. But then, a faint, shallow breath. "The baby's alive," Collins called. "We need medics now." A miracle in the darkness. Minutes later, paramedics rushed in, carefully placing Ethan and the baby on stretchers, checking their vitals. As they wheeled them out, Ethan's small fingers clutched at Hernandez's uniform. "Is Doggy coming too?" he asked weakly. Hernandez met Collins' gaze. They looked at the starved, desperate dog, a creature who had every reason to be aggressive, yet hadn't harmed the children. "Yeah, buddy," Hernandez said, ruffling Ethan's hair. "Doggy's coming too." As the ambulance doors shut, carrying the children toward a second chance at life, Collins exhaled. "I don't know how they made it," he admitted. Hernandez shook his head. Maybe they weren't surviving the dog. Maybe the dog was surviving for them. And as they loaded the German shepherd into the rescue van, they knew this wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of unexpected heroes. The rescue that changed everything. The emergency sirens echoed through the streets as the ambulance sped toward the nearest hospital, its wheels cutting through the early morning fog. Inside, 3-year-old Ethan clung weakly to a paramedic's hand, his small fingers barely strong enough to grip. Beside him, a medic carefully monitored the frail baby wrapped in a thermal blanket, their tiny chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Officer Rafael Hernandez sat across from Ethan, watching the boy's tired eyes fight to stay open. The child had been through hell, yet there was no fear in his gaze. Just exhaustion, confusion, and something else. Something that looked an awful lot like trust. "Hey, little man," Hernandez said softly. "You did really good calling 911. That was really smart." Ethan blinked slowly, his lip trembling as if he was just now realizing that he wasn't alone anymore. "Mama said call if I got scared." Hernandez swallowed hard. There was no telling how long the boy and his baby sibling had been in that trailer alone, but from the state of their tiny, malnourished bodies, it had been far too long. "You did exactly what you were supposed to," Hernandez assured him. The paramedic beside them checked Ethan's paper-thin arms, noting how his skin was ashen and dry from dehydration. She spoke softly to the officer. "He needs fluids, and he's definitely malnourished, but he's alert, which is a good sign." Hernandez nodded, but his attention was drawn to something else, the way Ethan kept turning his head toward the doors of the ambulance, as if looking for something. Or someone. "Hey, what's wrong, buddy?" Hernandez asked. Ethan hesitated, then whispered, "Where's Doggy?" The question hit harder than Hernandez expected. "Doggy's okay," he promised. "Animal control is taking care of him. He's going to be safe, just like you." Ethan's brows knit together, his lips pressing into a firm little line. "Doggy kept us warm," he said simply. "Doggy kept the bad people away." Hernandez exchanged a look with the paramedic. There had been no sign of any bad people at the scene. Just an empty trailer and a dog who had been moments away from starvation. Still, something about the way Ethan said it made Hernandez's stomach turn. There was more to this story. And they were just getting started. The hospital arrival. The ambulance pulled into the emergency bay, and within seconds, the medical team rushed forward. The baby was the priority. The moment the doors swung open, a team of pediatric specialists carefully lifted the tiny bundle from the stretcher, their voices clipped and professional as they called out stats. Severe dehydration, low core temperature, possible hypoglycemia. Prepare NICU monitoring. As they wheeled the baby inside, Hernandez felt a small tug on his sleeve. He looked down to see Ethan reaching for him, his exhausted little face filled with uncertainty. Hernandez crouched beside him, resting a gentle hand on his back. "It's okay, buddy. They're just taking care of the baby." Ethan sniffled. "Baby's name is Noah." Hernandez smiled. "Noah is in the best hands, I promise." As the doctors moved Noah into intensive care, Ethan was brought to a separate exam room. A pediatric nurse named Emily Carter greeted him with a warm, reassuring smile. "Hi, Ethan. My name is Emily. I'm a nurse, and I'm going to help you feel better, okay?" Ethan nodded, but as the nurse checked his vitals, he remained silent. His eyes stayed glued to the doorway. "Ethan," Emily said gently, "are you hungry?" The boy hesitated. "Can Doggy eat too?" Hernandez's heart clenched. The child wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the dog that had protected him. Emily glanced at Hernandez, her brows lifting in question. "Doggy." Hernandez nodded. "A German shepherd. He was with the kids in the trailer. Pretty sure he kept them alive." Emily smiled at Ethan. "I bet Doggy is getting lots of food and love right now." Ethan relaxed, just a little. Then, quietly, he whispered something that made every adult in the room freeze. Doggy was waiting for Mama to come back. The investigation begins. While Ethan and Noah were being treated, Sergeant James Collins and his team had returned to the trailer. The place was a wreck, a forgotten, abandoned shell of a home. Collins surveyed the mess, the rotting food, the piles of torn paper, the filthy blankets thrown in a corner. He tried to picture what it must have been like for two small children to survive in this space. He turned to his partner, Officer Megan Wright, who had just finished taking photos of the interior. "It's a miracle they made it," Wright muttered. "There's barely any food. If that dog hadn't been there, I don't know if they would have lasted much longer." Collins nodded grimly. "Something doesn't add up, though. The place is trashed, but it doesn't look like a permanent home. It's like someone just left them here." Wright frowned, flipping through the initial reports. No immediate family has come forward yet. No neighbors reported seeing an adult here for weeks. Collins let out a slow breath, his eyes scanning the space. Where the hell is their mother? The silent guardian. Meanwhile, at the local animal shelter, the German Shepherd, now officially named Voggy by Ethan, was under medical observation. Veterinarian Dr. Lauren Hayes examined the dog carefully, taking note of his protruding ribs, his sunken eyes, and the scars along his legs. "This dog has been through something," she murmured to her assistant. As they fed him, something unusual happened. Doggy didn't eat right away. Instead, he sat perfectly still, his ears perked up, his eyes trained on the door, waiting for Ethan. Hayes sighed, shaking her head. Loyal doesn't even begin to cover it. The moment that changed everything. Back at the hospital, Ethan had finally fallen asleep in a hospital bed, his tiny body curled up under a soft blanket. Hernandez stood outside his room, watching through the glass as Emily adjusted his IV. "He's stable now," she told the officer. "But he needs time. And more than that, he needs answers." Hernandez nodded. "We'll find them." Just then, his radio crackled to life. Collins to Hernandez, "You're gonna want to hear this. We found something." Hernandez grabbed his radio. "What is it?" A pause. Then Collins' voice, low and serious. "It's a note, found under the crib. It says, 'I'll be back soon. Just wait.'" Hernandez felt a chill creep up his spine. "How old is the note?" Collins exhaled. "At least 2 weeks." Hernandez looked back at Ethan, still sleeping peacefully. For 2 weeks, that little boy had been alone in that trailer. Alone, except for his baby brother. And a dog who refused to leave his side. This wasn't just a story of abandonment. It was a story of resilience. And it wasn't over yet. A mystery unfolds. The truth behind the abandonment. The rhythmic hum of medical machines filled the quiet hospital room, where 3-year-old Ethan lay curled under a blanket, his tiny body finally resting after days, maybe weeks, of survival on instinct alone. Beside him, his baby brother Noah remained under intensive care, hooked up to monitors that tracked his fragile heartbeat. In the dim glow of the overhead lights, Officer Rafael Hernandez leaned against the wall outside their room, watching through the glass panel. He had been on the force for years, but this case felt different. There was something about Ethan's unwavering loyalty to the German Shepherd, the way he had clung to the idea that Mama would come back. Something wasn't adding up. Then his radio crackled. "Hernandez, it's Collins. We need you at the trailer. Now." The urgency in Sergeant James Collins' voice sent a jolt of adrenaline through Hernandez. "On my way." Back to the scene. A haunting discovery. Hernandez pulled up to the rundown trailer once again, the place now fully roped off as an active investigation site. The morning light made the scene look even worse, a house that had given up long before its occupants had. Collins stood on the front steps, flipping through a small worn notebook. "What did you find?" Hernandez asked, stepping out of his cruiser. Collins handed him the notebook, its edges yellowed with age. This was under the crib. Hernandez's brows furrowed as he flipped through the pages. The handwriting was messy, rushed, like someone was writing in a hurry. Then he landed on a passage dated 2 weeks ago. "I don't have a choice. I have to go. I'll be back soon. Just wait." Hernandez exhaled sharply. 2 weeks, he muttered. Who leaves their kids for 2 weeks and expects them to just wait? Collins shook his head. "That's not all," he said. "We ran the property records. The trailer isn't registered to anyone in the system, so we don't even know who lived here. Not officially. But neighbors say a woman, early 30s, dark hair, always in a hurry, was seen here off and on. No one knows her name. No one's seen her in days." Hernandez sighed, rubbing his temples. "Great. So we've got 2 abandoned kids, a missing mother, and no records of who they even belong to." "Pretty much." Hernandez clenched his jaw. "Then we start from scratch." A child's memory, piecing together the past. Back at the hospital, Nurse Emily Carter sat beside Ethan. gently brushing his unruly blonde curls from his forehead. He had been quiet for hours, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for something or someone. She decided to try again. "Ethan, sweetheart, do you remember when Mama left?" Ethan's little fingers played with the hem of his blanket. "She said she'd be back," he whispered. Emily exchanged a glance with Hernandez, who had just entered the room. "Did she say where she was going?" Hernandez asked, crouching beside him. Ethan shook his head. "She took the car, said wait for her." "And did you wait?" Ethan nodded. "Me and Noah. And Doggy. But then, Doggy got hungry. I got hungry too. Noah just slept. I gave him my juice, but then it was all gone." Hernandez felt his chest tighten. "You were very brave, Ethan." The boy hesitated. "Mama said never open the door. But I got scared." The big noise came back. Hernandez frowned. "What big noise?" Ethan's lip quivered. The man. The man in the dark. A new clue. The words hit Hernandez like a freight train. "What man, Ethan?" "Did someone come to the trailer?" Ethan buried his face in the blanket, clearly frightened. He knocked and knocked. Then he got mad. But Doggy barked real loud, and he left. Collins, who had just stepped into the room, exchanged a look with Hernandez. Someone was trying to get in. Collins asked. Ethan nodded. "Mama wasn't home. I hid. Doggy kept me safe." Hernandez clenched his fists. So someone had been trying to enter the trailer while the boys were alone. And the only thing standing between them and that unknown threat had been a starving German shepherd. "Ethan, did you ever see the man?" The little boy hesitated, then shook his head. "Just the noise. The knocking." Collins took a deep breath. "We need to check security cameras around that area. If someone was lurking near the trailer, we'll find him." But as he said the words, a terrible thought crossed his mind. What if the man knocking had been looking for their mother, and she never made it back? The dog's silent story. Meanwhile, at the animal shelter, the German shepherd, officially nicknamed Doggy by Ethan, had been given food, water, and medical attention. But there was one strange thing. Doggy refused to leave the kennel. He sat near the door, his ears perked, his body alert, as if waiting for Ethan. When Dr. Lauren Hayes, the veterinarian, approached, she saw something unusual, a faded old collar buried under his thick fur. Carefully, she pulled it back to reveal a tag with a phone number. Her heart raced as she reached for her phone. If this dog had belonged to someone before, maybe, just maybe, it could lead them to the missing mother. She dialed the number. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then, a voice answered. "Hello." Dr. Hayes hesitated. I'm calling about a dog. A German shepherd. He was found protecting 2 children in an abandoned trailer. Do you know him?" Silence. Then, the voice, now shaken, breathless. "You found him. My God. I thought he was gone." Dr. Hayes felt her pulse quicken. "Who are you?" A long pause. Then, finally, "My name is Claire Weston. And if you have my dog, that means my sister is missing." A shocking connection. At the hospital, Hernandez's phone buzzed. "Detective, you need to hear this." Within minutes, Hernandez, Collins, and Dr. Hayes were on a conference call with Claire Weston, the woman who had just identified Doggy as hers. "I gave my sister that dog when she moved away last year," Claire explained, her voice thick with panic. "Her name is Julia Weston. She has 2 kids, Ethan and Noah. I haven't heard from her in weeks." Colin's stomach dropped. "Claire, do you have any idea where she might have gone?" A silence. Then, a whisper. "If she left them behind, it means she was running from someone." Hernandez felt his pulse pound. Running from who? Claire's next words sent a chill through his veins. Her ex. He was dangerous. He threatened to take the kids from her. If she disappeared, It wasn't by choice. A mother's sacrifice. The unbreakable bond. The revelation that Julia Weston had been running from someone, her abusive ex, sent a ripple of urgency through the investigation. Officer Rafael Hernandez and Sergeant James Collins knew one thing for sure. She didn't just abandon her children. She was trying to save them. Now they had to find her before it was too late. Following the trail, a race against time. Claire Weston, Julia's sister, provided everything she could. Old addresses, phone numbers, even social media messages from months ago, where Julia had hinted at feeling unsafe. She told me she was scared, Claire whispered over the phone. But I thought she was just being paranoid. If I had known. Hernandez interrupted her softly. Claire, this isn't your fault. We'll find her. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Where was Julia? And was she still alive? The last call. A faint cry for help then. A break in the case. A credit card transaction in a small gas station, just 40 miles from where the children had been found. Julia's name. A purchase for bottled water and a phone charger. A lead. The officers rushed to the gas station, questioning the clerk. Yeah, I remember her, the man said, rubbing his chin. She looked rough, like she hadn't slept in days, kept looking over her shoulder. She borrowed a phone to make a call. Did she say anything? Did she mention where she was going? Collins pressed. The clerk hesitated. She was crying. Kept saying, please, just let them be safe. Please. Then she ran out. Hernandez's heart clenched. Julia hadn't been running for herself. She had been running to keep her children safe. And then, one last clue. The borrowed phone had a call log. The last outgoing number was traced. It was a 911 call. From Julia. The reunion. A mother's love never fades. They followed the call's location to a rundown motel on the edge of town. Inside, Julia Weston sat on the floor of a dimly lit room, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes hollow and filled with exhaustion. She was alive, but just barely. The moment she saw the officers, she flinched, expecting the worst. Please, she whispered, don't take my babies away. Hernandez knelt in front of her, voice gentle. Julia, your boys are safe. Ethan and Noah are at the hospital. They're okay. The moment the words left his mouth, something inside Julia broke. Tears spilled down her face, her entire body shaking as she gasped for air. They're alive. They're alive. And they need their mother. For a long time, she just cried. Then, with every ounce of strength she had left, she stood up. Take me to them. A mother's embrace. The moment that mattered most. When Julia entered the hospital, she looked nothing like the woman Ethan remembered. She was thinner, worn down, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. But the moment Ethan's sleepy eyes opened and saw her, Mama, her legs gave out. But before she hit the floor, Ethan rushed forward, tiny arms wrapping around her. I waited, Mama. Julia sobbed, pressing kisses all over his head. I know, baby. I know. I'm so sorry. Nearby, in his crib, baby Noah stirred, sensing his mother's presence. Julia leaned over, pressing her forehead against his, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude. They were safe. They had survived. And now, they were together again. A silent hero, the dog who saved them all. But there was one last reunion. Outside, in the hospital courtyard, a familiar pair of eyes watched from a distance. Doggy. The moment Julia saw him, she covered her mouth with her hands, her breath catching. You saved them, she whispered. Doggy wagged his tail slightly, but his gaze stayed on Ethan, waiting for permission. Ethan grinned. Doggy. In an instant, the German shepherd rushed forward, bounding into Ethan's arms, knocking the small boy onto the grass in an explosion of joyful licks and wags. Julia wiped her tears, kneeling beside them. I thought I lost you, she murmured, stroking the dog's scared fur. Hernandez smiled. hands in his pockets. "Looks like you've got a family member for life." Julia nodded, pulling Ethan close with one arm and placing a hand on Doggy's back. "We always did." Moving forward, the start of something new. With Claire's help, Julia got back on her feet. A domestic protection order was placed against her ex, ensuring he could never come near them again. With community support, Julia found a new home, a fresh start, a place where her boys could grow up safe, loved, and never afraid again. As for Doggy, he never left Ethan's side again. A once starving, abandoned dog had turned into a guardian, a protector, and a lifelong friend. And maybe, just maybe, he had been the one who saved them all. The true lesson. A story of strength, love, and hope. This wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story about a mother's love, a boy's unshakable faith, and an unlikely hero who never gave up. Because in the end, no matter how dark things seem, no matter how alone we feel, there's always someone watching over us. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's a stranger. And sometimes it's a dog who refuses to leave your side. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.